My name is Robert Hale. I am 82 years old, and according to the world, I won. I built companies from empty rooms and borrowed desks. I signed contracts that changed my bank account and my reputation. My name appeared in magazines. People stood up when I entered rooms. They called me driven, focused, reliable. No one called me present. I grew up in a house where money was a daily fear. My father worked himself into exhaustion and still came home ashamed. My mother learned how to stretch nothing into dinner. I promised myself one thing very early in life. I would never feel that powerless again. So when opportunity knocked, I didn't just open the door. I chased it down the street. My first job paid little, but it paid in hope. I stayed late, volunteered for extra work, learned to speak like confidence even when I felt none. When I married my wife, Susan, I told her honestly, I'm going to work hard, maybe too hard. She smiled and said, as long as we build something together. I believed we would. At first it felt like teamwork. She supported me. I told myself every long night was temporary. Every missed dinner had a purpose. I'm doing this for us, I said often. That sentence slowly became my shield. When our first child was born, I was in another city finalizing a deal. The call came late at night. I congratulated myself for not canceling the meeting. I thought that was strength. I flew home 2 days later and held my son like a fragile responsibility. I felt pride, but I also felt something uncomfortable. Distance. I pushed it away. As the years passed, my schedule filled. Promotions came. Expectations grew. And somehow, my life outside work shrank without me noticing. Susan stopped asking when I'd be home. She started planning without me. The kids learned the sound of my keys didn't mean playtime. It meant quiet. I told myself they understood. Children understand far less than we hope. I missed school plays because of meetings, birthdays because of deadlines, vacations because of just one more call. Each time I promised I'd make it up to them. Later became my favorite word. One night, I came home early, earlier than usual. I expected gratitude, maybe surprise. Instead, I found Susan already asleep and the kids in their rooms. I stood in the hallway, unsure where I belonged. That should have scared me. Instead, I went back to work the next day and stayed even later. Success has a way of rewarding avoidance. The more I worked, the more indispensable I felt. And the more indispensable I felt, the less I noticed how replaceable I was becoming at home. Susan and I talked logistics, not feelings. Schedules, not dreams. When we argued, it was quiet and controlled. No shouting, no drama, just erosion. I thought silence meant stability. Years later, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, I don't feel married to you. I laughed. I actually laughed. We have a good life, I said. We're comfortable. The kids are fine. She looked at me the way you look at someone who's missed the point for too long. I needed a partner, she said. You needed an audience. The divorce was clean, respectful. Everyone praised how mature we were. No one saw how empty the house felt afterward. I told myself I'd rebuild my relationship with my kids now, take them on trips, buy them things I couldn't afford before. I learned too late that presents can't be back paid. They were polite, distant, independent. They didn't call for advice. They didn't share fears. They didn't need me. I had trained them well. Work filled the silence. Bigger deals, bigger numbers, bigger applause. And then one day, it stopped. Retirement arrived like an awkward guest. Suddenly, I had time. Too much of it. The phone didn't ring. Emails slowed. Invitations stopped. I sat in my large, quiet house and realized something terrifying. I had built a life that only worked while I was busy avoiding it. At night, memories started showing up uninvited. The door frame with pencil marks tracking my kids' height. The unopened birthday cards. The times I said later when now was needed. For the first time, success felt heavy. I began to understand what I had traded away, and the truth hurt more than any failure ever could. I used to think regret would arrive loudly, with panic, with drama, with tears that wouldn't stop. Instead, it came quietly. In the mornings, I would wake up with nowhere to be. No meetings, no deadlines, just silence and a calendar that meant nothing anymore. I'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee growing cold, realizing there was no one waiting to hear about my day. When I was working, people needed me, or so I believed. Now I understood something painful. They needed my position, not my presence. My son called less and less. My daughter sent short messages on holidays. Not cruel, just careful, as if closeness required an effort they no longer wanted to make. I don't blame them. One afternoon, I found an old videotape while cleaning a closet, a school play. My daughter was maybe 8. She stood on stage, scanning the audience. I knew what she was looking for. Me? The camera never found me either. I turned it off and sat there for a long time, holding something I could never fix. People ask me what my biggest mistake was. They expect something dramatic, a bad investment, a missed opportunity. It wasn't. My biggest mistake was believing love was patient enough to wait. Love is many things, but it does not wait forever. I tried to reconnect. I invited my children to dinner, paid for trips, asked questions. They answered politely, carefully, like adults who had already moved on. I had become a relative, not a father. That's when it finally hit me. You don't lose relationships all at once. You lose them in inches every time you choose work over presence, every time you delay a conversation, every time you assume there will be more time. I spent my life planning for the future and forgot to live in the present. By the time I learned the difference, my future had already arrived without me. At night, I replay moments I thought didn't matter, The times my wife wanted to talk, and I checked my phone. The nights my kids waited up and fell asleep. The mornings I left before anyone woke. I told myself I was providing. What I was really doing was disappearing in a socially acceptable way. Here's the truth no one tells ambitious men. You can be admired and unloved at the same time. Applause feels warm, but it fades fast. Silence lasts much longer. If you're listening to this and telling yourself this story doesn't apply to you, I said the same thing. I thought I was different, necessary, just temporarily unavailable. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent. I don't hate my life. I'm grateful for what I achieved. But gratitude and regret can live in the same room. If I could speak to the younger man I was, I wouldn't tell him to quit. I'd tell him to notice. Notice the child waiting in the doorway. Notice the spouse growing quieter. Notice how success keeps asking for more and giving less. I would tell him this. One day, the meetings will end, and the people you postponed will not be there to greet you. Build your career, yes, but don't build it on the bones of your relationships. Because at 82, when the world finally stops asking for you, all that matters is who stays. And success doesn't stay. People do. This is not advice from a bitter man. It's a confession from an honest one. Learn from me while you still can.